One of the most influential cultural myths that has persisted throughout the English-speaking world over the course of the last century is the notion that if one works diligently, they would eventually earn enough money to own a home for themselves and begin a family. In this video, we will talk about housing affordability crisis. Home sellers turn to concessions. Stay with us till the end, because we will let you explore something really useful. If you're new here, like this video and subscribe to get the latest updates. Let's get started. It was accurate for a considerable amount of time. Following the conclusion of the First World War and the turn of the century, the percentage of people who owned their own homes skyrocketed in both the United Kingdom and the United States, reaching a peak of almost 70%. This was a result of young adults leaving their parents' homes and establishing their own homes. In recent decades, however, that trend has not only ceased, but has actually reversed itself. Almost half of young adults between the ages of 18 and 34 in the United States and the United Kingdom lived in their own apartment or house with their own children in 1980, making this the most prevalent living arrangement for young adults. Currently, this is only true for approximately 1 in 5 people, and the most typical arrangement for individuals between the ages of 18 and 34 is for them to live with their parents. Despite the fact that some of this can be attributed to the growth of higher education, the trends continue to be consistent, even when students are excluded. The idea of having a house of one's own for one's family has become nothing more than a far-off fantasy. However, despite the fact that the challenge of home affordability receives a considerable amount of attention, it frequently appears to be secondary to other pressing concerns of the day. There is a possibility that the disintegration of a central aspirational concept across the expanded Anglosphere will become inconsequential background noise. A significant factor that contributes to the absence of serious attention or action is age, which operates in 2 different ways. In the first place, the people who are most severely impacted by this issue are those who belong to an age group that still has a limited amount of political influence through voting. Second, there are very few people who are over the age of 45, which means that almost all major decision-makers have an understanding of what it is like to have this particular significant rite of passage delayed, often for an extended period of time. There is a lack of appreciation for the latter point. There are well-established methods that we use to discuss and address recurrent economic shocks, such as recessions and inflation, which have been around for a long time. At this point, every available weapon is being used to address the issue, and the people, legislators, and the media are all talking about very little else until the worst of the situation has passed. Nevertheless, the housing situation is not the same. There are no playbooks that are up to date that may be used. During the past 2 years, economists, central bankers, and politicians have been working together to combat a crisis in the cost of living. This crisis has resulted in an estimated 20% increase in prices overall, which has been mainly offset by increases in salary. On the other hand, a 100% real terms increase in the unaffordability of what is maybe the single most important good in contemporary Western culture has been usually regarded as a problem that is primarily experienced by young people, and politicians have simply paid lip service to finding answers. When the housing conveyor belt breaks down, it has a wide range of significant and varied effects. According to a number of studies, persons who are unable to afford a home are more likely to delay beginning a family or simply choose not to have children at all. Moreover, individuals are diverted away from productive places and activities as a result of high housing expenses, which also significantly increases the disparity in wealth across regions and between regions. The fact that politicians on both sides of the Atlantic are able to point to hopeful indicators concerning inflation's likely return to normal levels is a source of relief for them. Large elections are forthcoming on both sides of the Atlantic. There are no indications that the crisis of housing affordability will ease anytime soon. As the beginning of the election campaigns approaches, it ought to be at the very top of the list of priorities. In many areas, the housing affordability crisis has become a critical issue, leading house sellers to consider making a variety of compromises as a tactic to negotiate the difficult market conditions. Housing affordability is a complicated issue with many facets, including social, economic. The mismatch between the supply and demand of housing is one of the main causes of the crisis in home affordability. A lack of land for construction, population increase, and rapid urbanization have resulted in a shortfall of housing units to fulfill the rising demand. Because of this scarcity, real estate prices have increased, making homeownership unaffordable for a sizable segment of the populace. Aside from that, economic problems like stagnating wages and growing living expenses make the affordability issue even worse. A large number of prospective homeowners are unable to close the gap between their financial capability and the high cost of housing since salaries have not kept up with the rise in property values. The gap between those who can afford to buy a home and those who are unable to do so has grown as a result of this expanding discrepancy. Home sellers are turning more and more to compromises in an effort to draw in buyers and speed up transactions as a result of this crisis. Concessions are a range of incentives that sellers provide to purchasers in order to entice them. These concessions could take the form of lower prices, paying closing costs, or giving extra features and improvements. Sellers hope to increase accessibility and appeal of their houses, particularly for those facing financial difficulties in the face of rising housing costs, by making concessions. Sellers frequently use price reductions as a concession strategy in an effort to lower the asking price of their properties. To sellers looking to maximize their profits, this could seem contradictory, but it's actually a practical strategy for adjusting to the reality of the market. Sellers who modify their asking price recognize that they must match their expectations with the purchasing power of possible purchasers, which promotes a more diverse and dynamic real estate market. Another concession tactic that is gaining popularity is paying for closing costs. Beyond the purchase price of the property, there are other expenditures associated with buying a home, such as closing costs for title insurance, legal fees, and appraisal fees. When sellers agree to cover part or all of these expenses, purchasers' financial burden is lessened and homeownership becomes more accessible to a wider range of people. Sellers are using non-monetary incentives in addition to monetary concessions to differentiate their properties. This could be making investments in house restorations and enhancements, offering home warranty packages, or supplying furnishings or appliances. These extra benefits might improve a property's total value proposition and draw in more prospective purchasers who might be persuaded by the idea of a renovated or move-in-ready home. Concessions are used by vendors not only out of charity but also as a practical way to meet the demands of the market and increase sales. Seller rivalry heats up when there is an abundance of available properties in a saturated market. Those who understand the value of setting themselves apart by making compromises will be in a better position to quickly acquire a buyer. Concessions, however, raise more concerns about their long-term viability and effects on the real estate market, even while they might offer a temporary fix for certain sellers. The frequency of concessions may normalize down property values, which could have an impact on the state of the housing market as a whole. It is imperative that policymakers and industry stakeholders give due consideration to the ramifications of these practices and strive towards comprehensive solutions that tackle the underlying causes of the affordability dilemma. The direction of housing affordability is significantly shaped by government action and policy changes. The implementation of policies aimed at augmenting the housing stock, optimizing the development approval procedure, and promoting sustainable urban planning are vital measures in tackling the systemic problems that are fueling the crisis. A more balanced housing market can also be facilitated by policies meant to raise income levels, such as increasing the minimum wage or offering targeted financial aid. This is it for today. Let us know your favorite part in the comments. Have a great day.